Hello and welcome to Venus Consciousness. And I am here on my Wednesdays live with Venus and just want to welcome you to this live session. And I'm hoping that you can hear me because it is always a bit of a um, wondering if people will be able to see and or hear me. Guys some love. Thanks for being here. That you can hear me and just chime in if you can't, if there's no audio. Otherwise, I'm assuming that you can hear me. So, yeah, this is a little bit of a new time for me. Usually I do it earlier in the day, but my kids are out of school and it's summertime. Any of you parents might know. So, finding a new rhythm. And also, I thought maybe this live session we could talk a little bit about I've talked a lot about the healing journey, but I wanted to talk a little bit about when you are healing or a survivor of anything, what it is like to sort of I think I was sort of wanted to talk about dating because it's something that I've been getting back, dipping my toes back into since it's been about 4 years since my husband Finn died. And for those of you who know my work, you might know that my husband died of cancer in 2022. And he was really my soulmate and sort of my everything after having had, um, as I'm sure many people can relate, a lot of trial and error with sort of ever since puberty of learning how to love myself and always seeking love outside myself and wanting validation. And I just wrote an article about, the hurt little child within us is seeking someone else to hold up a mirror and to say, like, you're good enough. I see you. I can witness you. And that's one of the reasons that I really love Substack is because I feel like those of us that are here are really here with a mission to speak about the things that we've survived and the wisdom we've gleaned along the way. And also, we're here to experience other people and to sort of just be real, to drop out of the chaos and the superficiality that is small talk and is our world and is a lot of people you might work with, or in my case the people I see the most are like, parents I might see at drop off and pick up. And yes, I have some friends. I've also cut away. I've been using the word shit ton a lot, but I've cut away a shit ton of relationships that weren't serving me because they were just like I wrote in my article, we're all hurt, but just because a lot of people are hurt, but they have a hard time or they choose not to do the work, which is holding that inner child that is wounded, that's looking for reflection, that's looking for validation. There's so many other things you can do besides sit in that painful place with the part of you that you've abandoned for years since childhood because you were taught that in order to survive, you had to abandon yourself, you had to make yourself smaller, you had to dim yourself, you had to keep yourself safe. And so, but a lot of people get hooked into this egoic place where it's like I wrote a Substack note recently about how in so many relationships in my life, I was pouring out hoping, well, maybe if I show enough love, maybe if I love others the way that I always hoped I might be loved, maybe it'll come back to me. But the problem is that's doing it backwards because what you're doing is you're selling yourself short in the hopes that maybe you'll get something back. When really what needs to happen is you need to be able to turn away from all the people that are also just spinning in their own chaotic field. But the problem with that, and that's gonna lead me into my dating conversation, is that if you were raised in an environment where chaos was normal, where not being seen, not being validated was wired into your earliest sense of what being cared for means, what being loved means. Like I talk a lot about this phrase, danger equaling intimacy. And maybe if it's not as extreme, if you had parents that were, relatively grounded, healing, trying their best parents, I feel like most of us have a generation before us of parents that didn't really know how to do the work, and they may have tried to, some of them, love us the best they could. Others were pretty fucked up and doing the opposite, or somewhere in between. But somewhere along the way, you get hardwired in that you're not good enough. Something must be wrong with me. Something must be, I must not be worthy. And so, because you have that internal, um, sort of your compass, I think of, like, how a compass faces north, or we should be facing like our North Star or like our higher self. But if that's broken, then what you have instead is a compass that's sort of all like twisted sideways. And that's going to not point north. That's going to point towards more trauma. And you're going to end up with a lot of trauma bonding. And so, just getting into like the dating situation, which I'm sure so many of you can probably relate in your own romantic escapades, whether you're with someone now or not, or whether you had someone, had relationships in your past. What I think ends up happening, and you hear a lot about this with attachment theory and with those that people that talk about it, and you've probably written about it too if you're writing like I am. But what we ended up doing is, again, like I said, we're going for what's familiar, what's hardwired in, and then also, we have our form of attachment, which for most of us was not a secure form, because we had parents that were either like intermittently available because they couldn't really be available for themselves, or they were addicts, or they were, maybe like dealing with a lot of anxiety and a lot of, or they were totally absent because they were workaholics, or they were just absent because they abandoned you altogether, like all the different ways that we are, that we're not sort of held for a secure attachment to be formed as early infants and in these primitive, but very formative years of like 0 to 3 are super important, but then, everything after that too. And so I think that, for me, what happened was, as I grew up and as I hit puberty, and I also wrote about this in my, Self Love is Not a Slogan, the piece I just recently wrote. I had had a dream not too long ago that I was in my old high school cafeteria, and I was lining up, and everyone was getting this like iron rod inserted into their head. And all of a sudden, I'm like at the front of the line, and I was like, I don't want an iron rod inserted in my head. And I like ditch out of the line. And I'm like, thank God I got out of that line. But realizing that, like, to me, when I woke up, I was like, that was my higher self, or like the part that, that feeds us the dreams, that has access to the collective subconscious, to our soul, to our spirit, the part that is the consciousness that, I love to think of Avatar, like the human has to go to sleep so that the soul can like can you can recharge the batteries. Like, what happens when you don't sleep? You literally go insane. Like, it's a form of torture. In, many prisons have used it. So sleep is where, even more so than food, is where we sort of like, um, we recharge. And that reminds me of something sort of cool. When I've done ayahuasca, in fact, it was doing an ayahuasca retreat that I'm about to go back and do. And, I feel like a lot of people might hear that word, or hear, people doing, the whole like, oh, you're doing drugs. But actually, this particular form of medicine I was drawn to. I'd never done it before, but I'm so glad I did, because DMT, which is the active ingredient, has been known, just like other psychedelics, it has been used in therapeutic environments, which the center I went to go do it at is a therapeutic. They have a psychiatrist and nurses. It's a licensed facility in Costa Rica. Oops. Oh, I put up my thumb and made a thumbs up. Anyway, yes, thumbs up for healing, no matter what modality it is. Yes. And some love. Let's throw some love in there too. But anyway, so I was drawn to go to Costa Rica. It was like, and DMT has been known to help people with PTSD, but it has also been known, including the founder who started Rhythmia, to unlock memories that were buried, because the way that the brain barrier, I don't even know exactly how it works, but it allows you to sort of, access parts of your brain that you might not have access to otherwise, and the retreat I went on, I didn't know I was gonna talk about this, but I am going back in a few weeks. It's been 3 years, and I'm gonna do a second retreat, so it's sorta on my mind. But what I was gonna say is, the owner who started it, he was and this again, I'll go back to, like, the relationships and the early bonding, but using these different healing modalities, so that we can stop running the same circuitry of the wounded child, always going for what's familiar. And because and welcome, we have some newcomers, and I just didn't say all your names because I really need readers and I can't read them very well, but I can see your little icon, and I probably should have my little readers on so I can read who joins me. But, anyway, thank you for being here with me, and yeah, this is, like, a new time, but I'm like, "Maybe the evening time's better," and then, of course, we're all over the world, so it's wherever it is for you, but I had been doing them in the middle of the day, and it's sort of fun because there's some new faces here, so thank you guys, and I love you. I'm always just sending love, like, actual love. I know these are just silly little hearts, but I actually do love you guys so much, and, it's gonna make me choke up 'cause, yeah, like, just being, people that are willing to be real and to, like, actually be authentic, it's such a rare thing, and I'm, like, always just, yeah, super grateful to Substack and to, people that show up that I've begun to meet that just are willing to be authentic and willing to be vulnerable, and, so yeah, thanks for being here. Anyway, so this place called Rhythmia, is was a is a facilitated place where the even the owner, he was a rageaholic, alcoholic, sex addict, drug addict, really struggling, suicidal, and he didn't know why, but the thing is, a lot of people that struggle with suicide and addiction, it's because there is trauma that your system got wired in young, and it's coping skills, like, you're trying to self-soothe or you're trying to escape, and it's the body. So I really don't like the stigma that gets put on addiction. Now that being said, sorry, my itchy nose. That being said, if you are someone, again, getting into the herders, like, you can be struggling with addiction, you can be struggling with suicide, ideation, or other forms of mental health, and just trying to survive, and then also you can be someone who is using that to escape, and then also sort of creating, relationships that are hurtful or harmful, or you can even not be an addict, not be struggling with mental health, and still be sort of on that narcissistic spectrum where it's all about the ego. And so I think that, yeah, it's just like I try to be really careful, and I don't like how society labels people that are struggling, because so many people that even don't look like they're struggling are actually the big wolf in sheep's clothes that are walking around, preaching the talk and all about, the spirituality or the, um, thinking that they're holier than thou, or some toxic positivity bullshit about, like, how you just need to, like, drink your smoothies and do your yoga, and you're gonna heal yourself. And it's like, but then you see those people, like, running in and out of the yoga studios, and I'm just not to be judgmental, but, like, people are all wrapped up in their brains and just, like, just full of judgment and full of, like, anxiety, and then, like, judging others. And it's like, but then the person that's really struggling maybe on the sidelines who can't even get to a yoga class but is, like, trying their best, but they have a shit ton of trauma they're trying to heal. And so it's, like, hard to keep down a job, or, like, I guess my point is that, like, it's a shit show out there, and, like, what I value is showing up, and I don't care what it looks like. And what I don't like is this whole, I mean, society in general, going back to that, like, iron rod being inserted into all of our heads. We we have this programming that wants to keep us in consumption mode, that wants to keep us thinking, like, if you think of so many of the pop songs and the love songs and the movies, it's all about, like, I just need that person to fill me. And it's because so many of us, me included, have been walking around trying to fill that original wound, which is because you had fucked up parents, because everyone's pretty much fucked up. You get wounded from the get-go because you are born this, like, completely vulnerable infant and you need to be taken care of, and the survival brain is like locked into like, what am I going to do to survive? And so you form these patterns of making yourself smaller, reading the room, hypervigilance, like all the things that we do. Don't speak your mind, and especially if you're a woman, or if you're a person of color, it's even worse because you have all of society's programming pushing you down, and the microaggressions on top of everything else, the all the isms. And as a woman, I have sexism, but I think if you're a person of color, you also have racism. And so it's like all the ways that we're constantly being battered, and then we're just trying to make it through. And then we have these nervous systems that are hardwired because we had fucked up parents to like be going after things that are still bad for us. And so I think that that's why healing is hard. And that's why I made a note. I was like, feeling it all is fucking hard. That's why most people refuse to do it. And, it's like, but the people that come to Substack and the people that are doing the work are willing to sit in the fire, willing to feel what it all feels like. And from that place, that is like my latest article, that is the self-love journey. And sometimes you can only get so far when you're on your own. So for me, like I met Finn, I sort of stumbled into him, but it was a definite destiny encounter with my two little girls, been living in the safe house apartment the year before that, like homeless because my first husband matched patterns from early childhood that I can't really name because there's lawsuits in process because of how dark and twisted it actually was. Um, but then I recapitulated, remanifested that in my first husband. Um, and and also, like, you think about it, like, with my first husband, because I was so programmed, again, that metal rod of, like, get the job, find the husband, have the family, that, like, when I did get pregnant without meaning to, because I wasn't being careful at all, because I think a part of me was like, "Oh, but I need that Prince Charming, so, I'm not gonna be that careful with birth control," because, like, part of me was just, like, running all this the subconscious, like, runs all this bullshit, and it's because it's all this programming from society, it's all of our wounding, and we're just like ships in the night, like bumping into each other. Like, who's driving? Who's drive like, that's what I began to realize recently. Like, who is actually driving the bus or the ship? Like, who's steering the ship? And like for most of my life, and I think most of all of our lives, it's this little wounded child and it's the subconscious. And so even if you're practicing the like, I'm drinking my green juice, I'm going to meditate in the morning. If you are not, like, really getting in touch with what's driving underneath that, and again, going back to my article, like I mentioned Deepak Chopra influencing millions of like, "Oh, it's all about the mindfulness," and writes books, and it's all about the practice, and then really he's good friends with Epstein, and he's like, "Can you bring your girls next time?" Like, he's a perpetrator, but underneath because it's the part that he won't access, that he won't cop to, that he won't admit to, and so the subconscious driving the fucking bus. So, it really takes a lot. It takes a lot to get off that track of letting the subconscious just run the show, and that's why we live in such a chaotic world, but we are waking up, and those of us who are like, "There's got to be a better way," are here figuring it out and sharing our voices and beginning to like be creative, which being creative is a human birthright. Like, it's our birthright to be creative. But again, the schooling system where it's just like you're put with all like the reason being put with kids of only that same age and then moving through with them and then the tests that happen, like education was set up to be for the industrial revolution so that they could have workers, like check off the box, create good workers. And so we're still at the end of that cycle where we're molding our children. And I mean, I do it too. Like, I send my kids to school. So it's like the system is broken. And yet, unless you have like, and I'm even a teacher, so I could have been like, oh, well, I'll just go homeschool. But not everyone is cut out to like form that type of structure. Like, I'm ADHD. So which I realized late, like, I'm not able to create that alternative idyllic, like, even, that's what I'm saying, like, even for us parents that are like, we're trying to break the generational trauma of our parents, but we're still gonna be plugging our kids in to the system that exists around us because we all have to, like, we're not living on a mountaintop, chanting to the sun and eating berries, like, we're in the midst of the soup of, like, food that has way too many pesticides on it, junk food because it's cheap and easy, but it has like all the ways. And so, like, of course, me and my kids, and probably you too, we have digestive issues because, especially if you're in the US, you know, the government is in bed with all the big companies and they want to keep us sick and they don't give a fuck. So, like, we all have, like, you travel to Europe. I went with my kids and I'm moving to Spain soon. They're all eating all the foods that, like, my kids and I can't even eat because, and when I grew up in Boulder where, like, we have access, we're not in a food desert like so many people in this country where, like, all you get is gas station. They don't even have grocery stores for miles in some of the big cities and in the poorer neighborhoods. But, like, I actually live in an affluent place eating organic food, and my kids have, like, my one daughter has celiacs, and, like, we're being poisoned is what I'm trying to say, is, like, they don't give a fuck. Like, they keep all the preservatives, all the dyes, all the everything in all the food, too much sugar, people with diabetes. So, like, I'm going on a rant, but, like, it's really hard to do the healing work because you are bombarded with a system that is struggling, like, and so I just applaud you and applaud myself for even showing up, but, at the same time, we can't if you're anything like me, you can't not show up. Like, something in you sort of broke that was like, "I'm done doing the rat race. I'm done doing it the way that I've always done it." And that's why we're here. That's why we're trying to find a new way. And actually, like, being on Substack and being with you guys feels hopeful to me because I'm like, we can navigate this. Like, our systems are strong enough. Sometimes they're not, like Finn died of cancer. Why are people getting cancer? My beloved died because of the poison that exists in our world. Like, there's a reason our cat died of cancer last year. There's a reason that we're dying. And yet, we're also warriors and we came here knowing that it wasn't going to be easy. And I know because I have, like, since Finn died, this sort of medium clairvoyant sense that I think I've always had, but used to only ever get these sort of prophetic dreams when I was sleeping. But then when Finn died, I started to, like, realize, like, oh, I actually have some medium capacities. Like, so it's not like I'm reading in some book that, like, oh, this spirit plane exists and, like, our souls exist beyond this life. Like, I'm actually having personal downloads, encounters with, like, people, including Finn and other family members and and a friend from my kid's school who died suddenly, who was 33, like, that came and visited me, like, in ways that feel so strong that I'm like, I know for myself that the other side is real, that, like, this earth plane is only one plane of existence. And yet also, like, I think for so much of my life, because I had, childhood sexual abuse that was, like, suppressed, I just wanted to go up and out. Like, I just was in art therapy today and, like, been working with her since Finn got sick, so, like, 4 years now. And a lot of when I first started seeing her, like, a lot of my drawings and a lot of what I would do, I mean, I'm making fun of the people that are, like, part of this toxic positivity cult, where it's like, do all the things that are gonna make you feel better and then you'll be better. But I was one of those kids. We lived in an ashram when I was younger, so I was exposed to meditation and, growing up in Boulder, it's very, like, woo-woo, hippie, yoga practicing, green juice drinking town, like I was saying. So, like, I grew up with this idea that, like, I could just exist if I could, like, go for walks or go for a hike or get my mind, have mindfulness practices or that. But then here I was, like, reenacting all this trauma in my relationships. And it's because you can't get there from the mind and you have to go into the body. But getting back to rhythmia, because I tend to tell my circles, like, go round and around. After Finn died, I was a total wreck, right? Because he was my rock. We met at the dog park. He was the one person in my life that I met that wasn't a karmic recapitulation of the fucked up shit that I grew up with. And because I believe, like, we had a destiny, like, we're soulmates and we had a destiny encounter at the dog park this one evening. And they say the rest is history, except for then we're living in a sick world and he gets cancer 8 years later and dies. So, like, shit happens, as they say, but it's like, what are you gonna do with it? And now I realize, like, if he hadn't died, we wouldn't have saved, like, I wouldn't have been able to save my kids from the abuse that I didn't remember that I had. And part of the way I even saw to do that was, what I believe in signs where like we get sort of information from the other side. And I don't know if you guys believe in signs too, but like to me, a sign, and my son who's autistic, we just got him diagnosed and he's like slightly autistic. So like you wouldn't even know really, but I know from seeing things at home. So I got him tested. But like he's always like, Mom, it's an airplane, like it's not a sign. And I'm like, no, and his younger sister and I are like, no, it is a sign. It's Papa, like Finn, we call him Papa. Because Finn used to be a pilot. And like it's not that like every airplane that crosses over is a sign, but what will happen is I'll be like feeling something sort of poignant or emotional. And then at that moment, I might be thinking of Finn or something else that touches my heart, and a airplane will fly over, and I'll get this feeling of like, wake up, or like it's like a little knocking, or it's like a little tickling of like some like pay attention. And so like that to me is the sign. It's like it's not only something that is in, because you're like, Toby's like, well, then everything can be a sign. I mean, yes, anything could be a sign. It's not the object itself that makes it a sign. What makes it a sign is when you um, see something while you're thinking or feeling something that keys you into like, oh, wake up. Oh, there's that. And you feel something like you feel a fluttering, or you feel a heart opening, or you feel a rush, and then and you hear the sign or see the sign or whatever. Maybe it's like a dragonfly that flies by and like reminds you of a time when you and your grandmother used to, collect dragonflies, and you were just feeling sort of sad, and she was maybe the one person who ever really saw you for who you were. So it's like it's that sort of magic that happens. And so that is how I got this sort of nudge to go to this ayahuasca retreat center. And getting back to that story, if I hadn't, and it was really out of nowhere, like I was interested in sacred geometry, and I wanted, someone was talking about it online, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like sacred geometry being like, Fibonacci spiral, or how like the plants all, and you can see like geometric forms that exist in nature. And I'm a Waldorf teacher, so we teach this stuff too, but also I became really curious about like how the rock and the flower patterns all match up. Like the star, when you cut an apple in half, the five-pointed star is the same, in the rose. And the five-pointed human is also like, if you think of Leonardo da Vinci's like human on the circle, and so really everything is geometry. But so I was on this like sacred geometry like rabbit hole, let's say. And then I was like, "Oh, I really like what this one guy's saying." So I follow his link, and when I go to click on his name, I cut and paste it. He's talking about his experience at Rhythmia, and I was like, "What's Rhythmia? That place looks cool." And then I realized like it's this ayahuasca licensed facility plant medicine center with a psychiatrist who helped found it, like doctors and clinicians, and you have to do like a medical intake, and it's high end, it's expensive. But at the time I was like, all of a sudden I was like, I need to go do that. And so I ended up down there, and the founder, who I told you if you were listening from the beginning, was really struggling, and he almost had committed suicide when his friend had called him up and been like, have you ever done ayahuasca? And so he ends up flying down, and it's a funny story because the guy that meets him at the airport is like, eating a Big Mac, and it's got like ketchup on his shirt and a big beer belly. And he like comes out and he's like, come with me in his old car and his old beater. And they like go to this like moldy house in the jungle. And Jerry like lies down on this rancid mattress and like puts and he's like, he's an alcoholic, and he's like drunk at this, but he's never not drunk. So he's like, you're not even supposed to you're supposed to go on a cleanse. It's called the dieta before you even do it. But like, he's all like drunk, and he shows up, and he like lays down on this mat and like takes the medicine, and like, because it's a drink that they actually boil. It comes straight out of the Amazon, and like and it's like a vine mixed with a bark, and you boil it down, and then that creates the mixture creates this active ingredient, which DMT is a hormone that our brain makes, but it's also found in the pituitary gland, and it's also linked to like the capacity of the brain. Like it gets released when you're born and when you die. So it's like this sort of threshold hormone that also is made with this special like medicine that is boiled in a very special way. And like when at Rhythmia, they do it with like shamans that have been trained by their ancient shamans in the tradition of these villages from the Amazon. So it's like very traditional and very sacred the way that the medicine is given and acknowledged. Anyway, so Jerry's like lying on this mattress, and the shaman goes, and the type of journeying they did, the shaman is with him and is like tell me where you're going." And so Jerry's like, this is the founder of Rhythmia, and you have to watch this video when you go. So when I get there, I'm watching this and I'm like, gosh, do we all have to hear Jerry's story? And now I'm telling you his story. But I'm like, do we all have to hear Jerry's story? And it's like, yes, actually, I'm glad I heard Jerry's story. So like the shaman is like, "What are you seeing?" And Jerry's like, I'm seeing my soul." And he's like, "Oh, you need your soul. You're going to go on a journey with your soul because you have to get a new heart." And Jerry's because Jerry was like, as if you were here from the beginning, like rageaholic, alcoholic, drug addict, sex addict, like really, really struggling. And so he's like, okay, well, what, go find your soul. And he's like, I see my soul. And he's like, it's like he's looking at himself, like in this sort of, you know, um, vision state. Yeah. And the shaman's like, well, get your soul to come with you. And he's like, my soul won't come. He's told me that I'm like not listening to him and I never like follow any of his suggestions. And I'm basically like, this is what I think of. Like when I think of people that are really fucked up, that are doing a lot of fucked up shit, I think they are basically ignoring their soul. They're just like a dog that's off the leash that won't listen. That's how I like to think of people, because 'Cause I'm like, every soul is pure. Like, I can have forgiveness even for my abuser, but I don't forgive his actions. But I can, like sorry, that happens when I lift up my thumb, but I can forgive, the soul that was these people that do these atrocities. I can forgive the pure soul because 'cause we're all born pure, but I'm not gonna forgive the human that became a monster. Like, I'm not gonna forgive the actions that you did, but I can forgive the soul that was inside you because that's pure. So, that's sorta how I distinguish, but anyway, so Jerry's like, um he's like, "He won't come with me," and then he gets him to finally come. He's like, "We'll make a bar," and he's like, "Well, my soul only says he'll come if I make a deal to, like, listen to him from here on out." And the shaman's like, "Well, then do it. You need him to come with you." So Jerry, like, shakes his own soul's hand, and, like, the 2 of them, go on a journey. So then Jerry ends up he's like, "Well, where are you going now?" And he's like, "I ended up on the moon." He's like, "You're on the moon?" And he's like, "Yes." And he's like, "Well, what does the moon have to say?" And Jerry's like, "Well, I can't really talk to the moon, but there's a computer." And he's like, "Well, what does the computer screen say?" And he's like, "It's telling me things." And he's like, "Well, what's it telling you?" "It's telling me I need a new heart, but before I can get a new heart, I have to go back to this childhood home." He's like, "Well, go to the childhood home then. Go where it says." So Jerry, like, goes to the childhood home, and I don't know if any of you have done any, like, psychedelics or healing medicine, but, like, it's sorta like a dream, like, you're sorta accessing dream consciousness states while being sorta conscious, which is why if you do it, like, with licensed practitioners who are doing it for trauma healing, you can access parts of your brain that previously would have been locked off. So, Jerry has to go to his childhood home, and then he goes in, and next thing he knows, he's in, like, the hallway and, like, just he ends up seeing that he was abused by his grandfather, and he ends up, the little boy he sees himself as a little boy, and the little boy, like, tells him this happened, and so he has a whole journey up with it, and he ends up, like, at the end getting a new heart, and it's this whole thing. And then he gets this mission because that he needs to open Rhythmia, and he needs to start helping other Westerners get access to the healing he had, and he heals himself, and he starts a whole new life, not as an addict, but as someone who's like, "I actually have a reason to live. I wanna help others who also had trauma that they don't know." Maybe not as severe as this, but, like, everyone has something inside them that, again, like I was saying, is driving the bus, is the little girl, the little boy, the little they inside you that's like, "I'm still hurting, and until I get my needs met, I'm going to continue to have you finding situations where you're gonna be recapitulating, reenacting that exact same wound over and over and over." And that's the whole reason that, like, this plant medicine, the people, these tribes in the Amazon, they brought it out of the Amazon to the point where we even have it as a medicine that we can talk about now because they were told doing their journeying, because ayahuasca is like it's like a I mean, I believe all of nature is sentient and that I've had experiences of feeling like the presence, like I told you guys, I have these sort of gifts that sort of came online after Finn died, of like sort of some clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentience, which just basically means that you sort of some psychic capacities that you see when you put yourself in a certain state. I believe we all actually have these senses. It's not just the clair senses, they're called. It's not just 'Cause when you think about it, like, and I talk about this before, like, as solid as your skin barrier feels or the computer or, like, the table or the chair you're sitting on or the couch, like, actually, if you were to take a microphone that microscope that's super high powered, you would see that it's actually space and it's moving particles and it's all energy. So, like, as much as science, that's another way that the false matrix just keeps us so locked in, is they're like, "Well, if science can't prove it and if it's not real, like, ha ha, ha, then you're just," and or religion. If the religious dogma doesn't say that the God in the sky, doesn't say that, like, it's the white man with the beard doesn't say it's okay. Oh, isn't that interesting that the God looks exactly like all the men who are in power around the world? Wonder why. But anyway, not to say I have a thing against white men because I don't, but I'm just saying, like, there's a reason the stories exist that they do, and I know plenty of white men who are struggling just as much. But I also know that they are also the ones that are on top happen to be, for the most part, white men, old white men. So, but it doesn't mean that I'm saying that all white men are bad, if you get what I'm saying. So, anyway, but point being that Westerners needed to be healed by this medicine, and so the shamans were like, they got a message from the sentience, the sort of, like, consciousness that is the jungle, that is Mother Earth, that is ayahuasca, that was like, the Westerners are fucking going, like, the suicide rates, again, talking about men, like, I have compassion, like, men are committing suicide rates, like, because they've been cut off from their agency, and yes, you have the abusers and you have the ones on top, the crazy baby boy billionaires, but men and women have been cut off from our agency, and so this medicine supposedly is coming out of the jungle because 'cause they're like, "We all need it." Like, people are dying, like my husband Finn, dying from cancer, but also dying from suicide, dying from drug overdoses, dying because we're hurting, because it's hard to be here. And so, anyway, I ended up in at Rhythmia, and I ended up not while I was there, but, like, after I came home, shortly after I came home, I ended up having a similar experience to Jerry, where I all of a sudden remembered in perfect clear detail that I was also a survivor of sexual abuse, and that in that instant, I also was able to, like, wake up, come home, and then save my children in a way. And it sort of broke my family apart. And of course, this is happening with the Epstein files. It's happening everywhere. It happens all the time. Like, when you have someone that comes forward, you're going to have those that don't want to deal with it, and you're going to have a split. And then if there's a fight or a legal fight, it's going to be a split over, victim blaming and saying the victim's crazy. She made it up. She was hurting, all the stuff that gets said about anyone who is gonna step up and talk about what actually happened, and the powers that be that don't want to admit, like, I even going back to Deepak Chopra, like, he was, supposedly in an article relieved that one of the victims, dropped the charges, and it's like, you wanna know why the victims are dropping the charges? They're dropping the charges because the system's rigged, that it's very unlikely that you ever win in those situations, and it's not about winning, it's about telling your fucking story so that you can at least, talk about what happened, because that's part of the healing journey. And we're in a system where, like, unless it can be proved in a court of law, you're probably not gonna have, perpetrators that are found guilty, because unless it's like a recent crime, you have to have hard evidence. So we live basically in a system where, we have pedophile rapists as, our leaders of our nations, and you have, it's just, we all know. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But I guess what I'm saying is, that even doing the ayahuasca, even doing all the healing, having the memories come up, when recently, because I was like, "I'm gonna talk about dating." Have I talked about dating yet? No, I've been talking about all sorts of other things. But, like, recently, I decided, I was like, I felt healed enough. It's, like, going on year 4 that Finn died, and I was like, I'd like to get my toes wet. I'd like to start to date again." Of course, what do I manifest the second I go online to start dating? And, like, I haven't had any, like, in-person dates, but I've had some, like, online experiences. And, like, what were over the course of, like, this past year, I've had, like, a handful, small handful, like 3 or 4. But, like, what did all of those situations end up showing me? They ended up showing me exactly what I realized, like, what I started talking to you guys about, is that, like, you are gonna continue to manifest the part of you that is still wounded in these people that that externally come forward. So, like, for me, it was, you know, people that are unavailable because, like, when my nervous system is in this, like, chase mode, this activation chase mode, I it's very, very familiar because it's like this sort of survival, activate like, when you're a survivor too, like, your sexuality gets activated really early. So, this sort of like, again, like I was saying, danger equals intimacy, sexual activation. So, like, it comes out that I end up being drawn to people who are also, like, energetic sort of perpetrators in various forms, and I'm not saying they're all, like, child abusers, but, like, that they are sort of that, maybe a narcissistic tendency or just, like, not who I am, so it's like, well, then why do I keep going after that? And it's been just a long road of feeling even like Finn has been from the other side being like, "Babe, time for this one." And I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, again?" But it really feels like he's like, "You have to go through these experiences because you keep having the lesson until you heal." And so, I think that, like, I might be, knock on wood, starting to come to the end of this series of lessons that I've been in my whole life of reenacting that original wound of the little girl who, like, learned that intimacy was danger and that, and sort of unplugging from that. And so, you know, yeah, it's sort of a work in progress, and I bet that you guys have your own stories that sort of mimic this journey of, like, being and it might not even if you're let's say you've had a stable relationship for a while, but maybe you notice it in your work environment or with your friends where you're like, "Oh, yeah, I am there it goes again, there's that wound again," and so I think that, like, there is no real clean answer of, like, how do you heal enough to stop being in that situation? What it really boils down to is that you every time you are in a situation like that, learning to have some agency. So, like, for me, it was like, realizing, "Oh, I don't have to stay in that friendship." That friendship reminds me of my mother who, like, although there was a side to it that, like, was nurturing, there was another side to it that was toxic, and so it's like, I don't have to like, learning to have, like I said, tenderness with teeth. Like, I now have tenderness with teeth, so that's like, the softness of think of a wolf or any animal that's like a predator, but also can be soft. Like, I remember back when I started this healing journey, this quote that really stuck with me that was like, "Become the hunter, not the hunted." And it's like, I spend my whole fucking life being the hunted, and it's like, I am so done being the hunted, so done. And the thing is, when you talk about being the hunter, if you are someone who has integrity, who's on the healing journey, who has empathy, you're not gonna be just being a herder. You can be a hunter who has integrity. You can have teeth and not use them unless they're necessary to cut away those that don't deserve to be in your space, to burn the bridges, to cut the cords. Like, and I wrote just today a note that was like, "Who's responsible for the biting dog?" Well, the first time the dog bites, and this woman, Byron Katie, who I really like, who some of you might have heard of, she writes about personal development, and she had a big awakening. She had a psychotic break followed by an awakening, and now she's a writer speaker. And one of the things she likes to do is question, like, sorry, every time I lift my thumb up, question like, what are my thoughts true, even though I'm having them? And so it's one of her proverbs that she probably got, but she likes to talk about is like, so if the dog who's responsible if the biting dog bites? Like, if it bites your hand the first time, what's funny, I just heard my dogs are like growling and playing right as I'm talking. See, that's like to me, that's like serendipity. That's like the signs where they're like, "Oh, mom, talking about biting dogs? We're gonna play." But, so yeah, the first time the dog bites you, that's on the dog. Like, you didn't know you got bit. But every time after that, if you're telling the story like, "Ow, I got bit. Ow, I got bit," like, yeah, you can keep telling the story, but ultimately, who's responsible for the fact that you keep getting your hand bit? That's on you. It's on you to walk away at that point. So, like, for me, losing Finn, losing my anchor, having my whole world turned upside down, but it wasn't the first time it had turned upside down because as we know, like, our wounds go back to childhood often, even if they're not as extreme as being sexually abused, like, they go back to childhood. And so you have to unpack, like, where those earliest wounds came from, and then you begin to see that, like, a lot of your relationships were formed with an old you that you had when you were still abandoning yourself, and that really it's time to walk away from those who, if they don't love themselves, they're never going to be capable of loving you. And so if they don't, you know, and it might not be obvious that they don't love themselves because they might be so masked that they seem really confident and they seem loving and they seem all the things. But because as you start to do the healing and you start to sink into what does my body say into alignment, how does this feel? How does this person make me feel? Do I feel deregulated? Do I feel chaotic? Again, some of these men I was dating, like online, one of them I met on Substack and I was writing about him because he was only 22. I never said his age, but he was only 22. And I was like, "Oh my god." Like, it was just an online thing we did for a while, but, like, we had a lot of good moments, but, like, online, like, talking when I say online, like, on the phone and getting to know each other, but also it was like, "You're only 22 and I'm 48, okay?" So, like, that's not gonna work. But also, like, it was sort of this chaotic swirl of, like, sometimes it was really good, and then sometimes it wasn't, and I was just, like, constantly being sort of, like, thrown about, and so, as I settled into my own nervous system, it was like, "Wait, I can find I can find my own solid ground," but it took a lot of, like, feeling really, really uncomfortable and a lot of acting out. But if you constantly are asking the questions of, like, when you have a quiet moment, go within and be like, "I feel really activated." Like, "What when did I first?" Like, you ask yourself, like, get quiet and say, like, "What's this about? When did I first feel this?" Like, help me understand. And if you ask whatever you believe, God, your spirit team, the earth, Mother Earth, like your higher self, it doesn't matter who you're asking, but just get quiet and ask, like, where your body, why am I feeling so like activated by this? Why am I so triggered? Why do I feel like I'm just like hovering above, like right here, and like anything below feels really scary and overwhelming? And just like lay down or sit down or take a second, step outside and ask yourself. And what you're going to be surprised that like you don't have to go to the jungle and do ayahuasca, but what was beautiful about that trip was we would have workshops after we did the ceremonies, and during the workshops they would teach you to ask these questions and to say, like, ask if you had an experience or an emotion come up during ceremony, it's telling you something, because that's what ayahuasca does. It leads you all the way back in, and it leads you it the brain barrier, like, gets sort of dissolved, and you end up accessing parts and memories that you didn't you that were locked off, and so, like, ask yourself, "Why are you showing this to me? Why are you showing this to me?" And so, I feel like I really got good at that skill during that week, and then in these last 3 years, I tend to do it, and because I was navigating such intense, well, awakened trauma. I don't want that little guy to go on again, but, like, I had awakened so much, like, repressed memories, and then I had the grief of my beloved, so, like, I was just on a huge roller coaster, but, like, instead of just feeling so out of control about it, I learned to be like, "These emotions don't have to take me down if I can just take a deep breath, take a moment and be like, what am I feeling? And even if I have to sob, like it actually sometimes feels good to let what's living under that tight, like keeping Pandora's box closed, like pressure cooker. Like you're like, I got to keep the lid on. I got to keep the lid on because I got to go to work and I'm just trying to survive. But the more you keep that lid closed, the more you're just like, the pressure's building, the pressure's building, the pressure's building. And that's what keeps us, pressure is what keeps us in that trauma loop, that trauma brain. Like trauma is saying trauma is, I forget, someone wrote this and I was like, that's so dead on. Like trauma happened fast, trauma happened out of control, trauma happened in a pressured environment where you didn't have options. So when the amygdala fires and you're getting triggered and you're back in that trauma place, you're going to feel like there are no options. It's black and white thinking. You have no way out, and you're just going to start scrambling, and it's going to be that hindbrain. It's going to be fight or flight or flee or freeze. It's going to be one of those. And so you got to, in order to get out of that place, it's not a huge deal. It's just being willing to sort of like take a deep breath, take yourself out of the environment. Like for me with my kids, it's like I'll go up and lay down on my bed when I'm just like, oh my fucking God, I can't do this anymore. Lay down for a second. And I might have tears like coming out the side of my face. And I'm like, what am I feeling? And then inevitably I'll have something like something will sort of rise up, almost like it does in a dream, or almost like it does if you were doing like a medicine journey. And I'll have like some sort of bit of me be like, oh, that's why I'm feeling so triggered. Like I'm being triggered, even though this person is not my abuser. Like I'm all of a sudden something triggered me into that. Or I'm being triggered about like when Finn got sick at the end, he pushed me away because his what he learned from having an alcohol or like a addict and alcoholic mother that was very unpredictable and not safe, and a dad that was sort of aloof and removed and remarried, was that like, and he was the youngest of 5, that he had to protect himself by becoming an island. And I've talked about this before, but he basically pushed me away, aside from luckily we had some couples therapy, but like that's how he coped. And so like I was so my attachment wound was like it was never predictable, and like was I going to get a monster, was I going to get a parent, and like also not remembering that, so it's all buried under the like layers, but like this very anxious like I need to connect, otherwise I don't feel safe if I'm not connecting, because then I know I'm okay, like if the room's okay I'm okay, like hypervigilance. And so like when Finn pushed away, it just, aside from the fact that that he was dying, and that's very activating for anyone, like I was activated by him being like, he wasn't like, babe, let me hold you and hug you and cry about the fact that we're going to lose each other. It was like, what's your fucking problem? I'm the one dying. Like you can come in and like say hi briefly, but like and also I think he was trying to protect me and all sorts of things that men, again, the programming, like do it alone. You know, you can't really show your emotions. You got to protect those around you at all costs, but they end up walling themselves off. And so basically what I'm saying is that like when these triggers happen, whether it was with my little 22-year-old, lover boy that never went anywhere but like spun me around and I wrote about it. And, I still care about him. I don't know if we'll be friends. I said the offer is open, but I don't know. We'll see. It was never really going to work out, right? 25-year age gap. But anyway, like I was getting so spun around with him, but like I also just told myself, I was like, I learned how to find my own center ground, like become the eye of the storm. How did I do that? I did that by being sort of crazy, like feeling really out of control. Like my daughters, like I think I wrote it in the article how my teenage daughter was like, Mom, wait, you were acting like that? Wait, wait, you were freaking out when there was like an 8-hour gap in communication, Mom? That's sort of insane, Mom. And I was like, "I know, because when he would just pull back and, like, go MIA, it would remind me of Finn when he was in his office and when he wouldn't talk to me, okay? And I just couldn't help it." She's like, "Yeah, I get that, Mom." She's really wise for her age, my almost 16-year-old. And I was like, "I know I wasn't being perfect, but, like, I had to work it out." And then I slowly began to regulate where I was like, "It doesn't really matter what he's doing, like, what am I doing? Like, how am I, like, fighting against this situation because it feels uncomfortable?" And so I think it's like that's how really the work is done. It's messy. It's like you're a hot mess and you just like sit in your hot mess of a self and you feel the feelings, and then you take a moment, like take a breath. Like I remember this channeler that I followed, Lee Harris, and those of you who follow me know about like, I've told you about my own capacities, but channels who actually like channel something beyond them, that they share wisdom. And I really loved every time he would speak, I was like, I don't care where whatever he's channeling is coming from, like it really opens me up. It makes me feel regulated. I love the wisdom coming from this person. So like for me, I never really cared like if they're a channel, how woo-woo it seemed, because I was like, this information regulates me like no one else. So if it happens to be coming from some star people that are in, don't have bodies and are talking through this man, Lee Harris, who I really adore because he's very gentle and very like just a safe human. I was like, I don't care. He's giving me wisdom. So anyway, with the Z, they were called the Z's that he would channel. And what the Z's would talk about is like, just like, yeah, coming into your body and, that just it's more it's not so much again, like the article I just wrote, it's not about having a practice where, like, if I just do the right things, if I'm doing it right, then I'll heal. No, it has nothing to do with any of that. Healing is much messier. It's much more organic. It's much more about learning how to regulate yourself out of a trauma state is much more about, like, I mean, they do talk about the sacred pause. They talk about, um and hopefully you guys can still see me because, like, I think that my oh, yeah, it's working. Anyway, they talk about the sacred pause where it's like when we were in couples therapy too, like, and anyone who's done therapy, like, if you can take just even a micro pause, and I talk about, like, going upstairs to lie down or stepping outside to get some fresh air if you're at work, or if you're in your car. Oh, I love my car for processing. Like, when I get home, I will often spend an hour sitting in my car because it's safe and it's contained, feeling my feelings, right? So, wherever it is that you find your safe place, you go there, especially if you're having a moment that's triggering. And you might do it after blowing up. Like, my kids and I get edgy, they get deregulated, they might cuss. I might, like, as I've sort of gotten older, like, I used to not cuss at all. And now, as my teenagers have gotten older, I'll, like, sometimes cuss. Am I proud of that? No. But do we know that, like, we can come back and repair if, like, people need to blow off steam and, like, a little bit of shouting happens? I'm not, like, condoning shouting or cussing per se, but what I am saying is that, like, be in the mess of it. You're not gonna be perfect. The important part is that you then take a moment to go within and to be like, "What is living underneath this really deregulated body of mine? Like, what is my body saying? What am I feeling?" Because really, alignment is about listening to the body. Like, when my first husband, my ex-husband attacked me, I had an intuition that he was gonna hurt me. Did I listen to it? No, because then my mind clocked on and I was like, "Oh, but he's telling me he wants to co-parent. Oh, he's telling me." Yeah, because he was also living in a dissociated state. But then as soon as he got with me, he got triggered and he attacked me. And so it's like, I could have prevented that if I had been in touch with my body and the fact that my body was like, danger, 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 danger. Like, we have red flags. They come up all the time. Or like, hi, I'm now, like, seeing that Jenny joined, and, like, thank you guys all for being here. But Jenny is one of my friends on Substack, and I was writing her about this stalker guy that, like, I also met on Substack, that this was before 22-year-old, and he was scary. He turned really scary, and I'm seeing Jenny's name, and it's reminding me because we sort of unpacked some of him together. She was supportive when the shit went down with him, but I almost had to file a restraining order because he was that scary. And, I realize that you have been here. Sorry, I just, like, I need my readers to read the names of everyone, but I could probably lean forward and see you all, but then I would not be by my microphone to be able to, like, say hi to you. But I just wanna acknowledge you guys for being here. I really, really appreciate it. But anyway, so this scary stalker guy, again, danger equals intimacy. Like, he came in really strong, love bombing me. And, like, because was so programmed to, like, believe the words, but not believe my body because of my early trauma, I just, like, went with everything he told me, like, "Oh, I'm a teacher and a musician too," and, like, all this sort of things. And so then, boom, snap, just like my trauma from early childhood, then he became the monster. And I wrote about that, like, just like how shocking that was, and yet exactly the same. But how did I regulate my way out of that? Well, it was through a lot of work. Like, it was through feeling scared and being like, this isn't the first time I felt scared. And then how do I not give my power away? Even when my ex attacked me and I was homeless and, like, on the run, and I had a lot of PTSD. Like, when I would hear a sound, I would jump because I thought he was, like, gonna come and maybe try to kill me for real. Because that's what he was, that mad that he wanted to scare me into thinking whether or not he was, like, actually trying to. I mean, he got charged with attempted murder, but, like, he told me later, because we actually are friends now, which some people find hard to believe, but, like, we are now. And he was like, "No, I was just trying to scare you." And I was like, "Okay, well, whatever you were trying to do, like, it actually worked. I was scared for my life." And he doesn't feel good about it. Like, he feels bad, which is why we can be friends. Like, he has taken ownership and he went to all the domestic violence stuff. And, like, I'm not saying it usually works because I don't think it does. It's like a drop in the bucket for the trauma that usually, if someone gets to the point where they're a domestic abuser, like, but in his case, he found the church, and he found, like, that Christ could forgive him so that he could forgive himself. And, like, while I also believe in Christ consciousness, I don't like the dogma of, like, if you don't if you don't I feel like Jesus was a prophet and I believe in Christ, but I also believe in, like, so many other modalities that I feel like divine consciousness can be translated into so many different ways, and there are so many different ways to worship the divine. Divine to me is consciousness, and it's love. It lives inside each living being, and it lives inside each living plant, and it lives in the stars, and God is a consciousness that created, like, but it weaves into, like, for me, the Old Testament, and so let there be light is talking about God consciousness. But I just don't believe that it's like there was one prophet and he was the son and God has a white beard and he sits on a cloud and he decides whether or not you get to be a sinner or saved. And if you're a sinner, you get to go live in hell being burned for the rest of eternity. Like, I'm like, does that sound like a story that would actually be the way that beautiful, like, consciousness exists? That, like, a little bunny, like when a baby bunny's born and the mama bunny's licking the little bunny, like, that's God right there. Like, the way that nature, the rainbow that springs after the sun and the raindrops and, like, the new sprouts coming up in the soil, like the waterfall pouring down the mountainside, the wind in the trees, like that feeling in your heart, like me when I'm having visions, like that is God consciousness. We are God. Like, God is all around us. It's not this thing to make people afraid. Who benefited when people were afraid? The church did. The church is just another system, just like the baby boy billionaires, just like the war machine that keeps us all enslaved. And so I tend to go off about a lot of things. My point is about regulating. My point is about healing. My point is about being on the healing journey. It's not so much about what you're doing, it's about the micro moments where you're able to step in the mess of it all, even if you are recapitulating trauma with men and boys online, because that's just how you do it. You find your way through it. And, like, at the end, with scary stalker dude and my 22-year-old lover boy, like, with both of them, even though it ended, I, in both cases, was like, "I'm sorry for my part, like, I this needs to end," and, like, with stalker dude, I wasn't gonna be friends with him because he was threatening me, so I had to, like, think about restraining orders, and luckily didn't have to file one, but, like, these are just examples of, like, I always at the end was like, I am friends with all my exes, like, and like I told you, Daniel, my ex-husband, like, we're friends now, but, like, at one point, he got charged with attempted murder. Like, you can turn it around, and you can also be a messy human, like, healing in the mess of it all, and and I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, you just gotta be real with it. You can't run away from it, and that's how you heal. And I had, I think, a lot to say this evening, so, I'm realizing that I've spoken for quite a while. But I love you guys, and, thanks for being here, and I hope you guys are all, like, doing well wherever you are and that you have the resources you need to be doing the hard work that is being alive and healing the trauma that so many others aren't willing to do. And I'm like, "Okay, I'm leaning my microphone so I can say to Gemma, and to Kavi, and to Nada, and Libra, and Michael, and Jesse, and Wayne, and Jap, and Jenny. Thank you guys, and if I missed anyone, just thank you guys for being here. I love you guys so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening or day, and I'll see you next time." Love you too, Jenny.